Well, as much as it pains me to say, that title and thumbnail is not clickbait. $18,056.34 is how much we have spent on this cruiser in servicing and repairs in the last 12 months alone. Now in today's video, I'm going to break that down, tell you exactly where that money has gone, what's gone wrong with the cruiser, how we fixed it, and where we're currently at the moment. A little while back, I also released a video outlining some of the issues we were having mechanically with the cruiser, which I'm glad to say have been diagnosed and repaired, so we'll also go into this as well. Now first up, I want to state that I'm not creating this video to get any attention or to get people to feel sorry for me, but just to create awareness on how expensive and time-consuming issues like this can be if you are currently traveling on the road or looking to travel on the road in the near future. First up, servicing. It doesn't matter what year your vehicle's made in, who makes it, or what model it is. If you're traveling around, you need to budget for regular services. Now in the last 12 months, I've had 3 services on my cruiser. I think there might have been a 4th, but I just cannot find the invoice for it. So I've got my laptop here to make sure I get these figures correct. But in August 2022, we had a major service with the diff oils replaced, and this came in at $968.37. Just after we started traveling on the road in December, we had a regular service completed in South Australia. This came in at $520. In April just gone, we had another major service, and again, the diff oils changed out. This came in at $678.63. Now, the services are quite expensive. I do get the diff oils replaced frequently, as I did have some water in them last year, and I just find that it's good to keep them nice and fresh. I also request, if I ever hear any rattling or anything that I think might need checking, there might be a little bit of extra labor there just to check that. I always get a genuine fuel filter replaced every service, regardless of the condition of the old one, because we all know how sensitive the fuel systems are on these V8s. Now, servicing is expected and budgeted for. We knew we had to get the vehicle serviced regularly as we travel around Australia. So let's move on to some of the more costly and unexpected repairs. So the first one was in July 2022. We had a bunch of electrical issues throughout the cruiser. Now, if you've watched my channel, you'll know I have a fairly comprehensive electrical system in the cruiser installed by a shop in Perth. Unfortunately, one by one, we started to experience some failures, a whole lot of minor issues, and the Victron Smart Shunt ended up causing some issues which shut down quite a few electrical components on our Pilbara trip last year. The electrical issues on the cruiser keep continuing and growing, so we've lost all control or all power to the Victron battery monitor systems, got no power to the battery chargers, the inverter, the water tank gauge, or even the water pump. And in addition to that, this morning we've had the air compressor circuit go down as well. So I finally found a really good auto electrician in Perth by the name of Automotive Electrical Designs in O'Connor. Really trust their team, and they've managed to fix up everything that went wrong. But this bill did come to the total of $1,986.45. Now, this was in conjunction with some other work that was additional gear that was going on the cruiser. Unfortunately, I don't have access to the invoice, so I'm estimating the parts and labor to fix the repairs cost around the $1,000 mark. The next issue, also in July 2022, and as a result of our Pilbara trip, was the starter motor. Now, if you're familiar with the VDJ V8 engines in these cruisers, you know that the starter motor is in quite a vulnerable and very average mounting location. We took 3 cruisers on that trip. We had 2 200 series identical models and a 76 series, and we did some river crossings that were very deep. All 3 of us lost our starter motors either on the trip or just after the trip finished. Fortunately for me, it was about 3 weeks after the trip had finished, but I was still up for a new starter motor. This is a pretty painful job to complete. It's a lot of labor involved, taking a lot of hardware in the intake system apart just to access the equipment. And my regular mechanic just said he didn't want to do it. So I made a few phone calls. I actually found the cheapest way to get this done was through a genuine Toyota service center, but it still came to $1,781.22, and that mainly consisted of labor. So fast forward to November 2022. I had just picked up our new Recon R4T SE, the camper we're taking around Australia, and I was 1 hour into my drive from Melbourne back to Perth again when we had issues with our turbos. The actual pressures were no longer meeting the target pressures, and it turns out that our turbos had failed. So unfortunately, I was stuck in Ballarat in Victoria with no gear, over a 9-day period, which was also the coldest Melbourne Cup long weekend since 1913. But a lot more detail can be found in relation to this failure in this video up here. But either way, that was a very, very costly repair, both in parts and in labour, and it totaled $7,000. So it was a really big setback only a couple of weeks before we started our travels. In the same month, November last year, just before we left, I had some more electrical repairs fixed up on the Cruiser. Not quite as serious this time, but it still came to a total of $464.47. So as we started our big lap around Australia, we drove from WA across towards South Australia and Victoria. Now, as we crossed the Nullarbor, would you believe it, but we got 3 quite large chips and a crack in our windscreen. Even though I had just crossed the Nullarbor twice to pick up the new camper with no issues, 3 cracks in one drive. So in South Australia, we needed a new windscreen. Luckily enough, the insurance capped that at $100, but still an expense we had to cough up. Now, between the months of December and January, we were travelling through South Australia and then across to Tasmania. And it was during this time that I noticed some clicking noises coming from the front CV joint, and sure enough, this was wearing out. Now, unfortunately, against my wishes, my previous mechanic had fitted an aftermarket CV axle than the last time it was replaced, and this did not last long at all. So upon return to the mainland from Tasmania, we had a genuine CV axle installed along with just a standard oil change at a Toyota service centre, and this came in at $966. Now, after this, we thought we were looking good. The Cruiser seemed to be running quite well, but it was then that we started experiencing some mechanical issues with the engine of the Cruiser. I explained a little bit more in my previous video, which you can check out up here, but essentially we started having some issues that sort of felt like a bit of a misfire at a very specific load rating. It was high load, low RPM. We would end up getting a turbulence in the air intake coming through the snorkel, the engine would start to vibrate, and we were blowing out a lot of black smoke. So after having some dusted turbos in November last year, I was extremely nervous, and there were definitely some anxious times to figure out exactly what we were going to do. I will admit there was even a small window there where we're looking at maybe selling the Cruiser and upgrading to something else, but I can confirm that moment of weakness has passed. This vehicle isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Now, thanks to my friend Tim, he put me on to a great mechanic in northern New South Wales by the name of Enhance Automotive, who I'd now, after dealing with them, highly recommend. We went for a drive with the Cruiser and the camper attached, and I was able to replicate that issue. In low RPM, high load, we had that turbulence, we had the vibration, we had the black smoke, but more importantly, we were able to diagnose the issue and move past it. So what was it? It turns out to be more of an issue with the transmission setup than it does with the engine, fortunately. I have both a transmission tune on this vehicle and a Stock Lock Extreme torque converter lockup kit, and these in conjunction together were holding too high a gear in the Cruiser during those really high load applications. What it was doing when we were towing our camper and the combined weight up some serious inclines, we were just administering way too much fuel into the engine. The transmission refused to downshift, and it was causing all of those issues I described. So you might be asking, well, why has it just come to light only in the last couple of months and not previously? And I believe this is to do with the terrain and the conditions that we're currently towing in. The camper that we got does come in fully loaded at 3.26 tonne. Now, I've never towed anything that heavy with this Cruiser and this setup. So the Cruiser and the camper setup was all new. The terrain and environment have changed significantly as well. If you've ever travelled through WA, you'll know that our state is about as flat as this tailgate here when compared to the eastern states. There are some seriously steep inclines over on this side of the country and terrain that we just simply hadn't driven in before. So as we started entering some of these harsher and heavier applications, this issue started to become more and more prevalent. In the end, the engine appeared to be just fine, but we still had to keep that RPM up higher and keep those transmissions cooler. So I decided to fit a wholesales automatic aftermarket dual core transmission cooler, and this goes in spliced into the factory loom and works in conjunction with the factory cooler. But this did set me back another $540.91. Now, while we're doing this work, we took a sample of oil from the transmission as well, and I can only describe that as being the same consistency as muddy water. It was really, really bad. So I decided while we're there, let's get the transmission serviced. So we dropped the pan, we changed the filter, and we did a full flush as well. This also came in at $606.75. Now, as my luck would have it, about a week before we went in to get these issues looked at, we ran into some braking issues too. Now, I've been running the DBA T3 slotted rotors on the Cruiser for quite some time, and I'm really happy with their performance. But coming down the Waterfall Way in northern New South Wales, it turns out they don't perform so well when the pad runs out and it's metal on metal. So I have no idea what's happened, whether we've worn through that pad very quickly or whether it just simply wasn't checked properly in one of its last services. But either way, we've destroyed our rear rotors. So I needed new DBA T3 rotors, which are definitely not cheap. We got the fronts machined just to be safe, and we got new pads all the way around. This came in at a pretty hefty $1,439.99. Now, just because this list isn't long enough, we've also detected a new leak in the intercooler system. The front right-hand corner of the intercooler has got evidence of a leak, and it's pretty common with these VDJ setups because the tanks are only crimped to the core of that intercooler. They become weak, they break, and it does start to leak. Now, I've been quite tempted to upgrade the intercooler to something quite significantly bigger, but given that we're on the road and I want simplicity and reliability, we've decided to go something a little bit more factory, but still with a small upgrade. So I've decided to go with a Diesel Performance Unlimited, or DPU, aftermarket intercooler. It uses all of the same mounting hardware and mounting locations, and actually uses the factory tanks from these intercoolers, which are welded to a PWR core, which is alleged to be 30% more efficient. Now, I haven't had that fitted just yet, but it is booked in and it has been ordered, and that is costing me a total of $1,990 to look forward to in just a couple of weeks. Now, the only good news, I guess, is that I now feel a lot more confident that we have a Cruiser that is a lot more reliable than it was just a couple of months ago. I feel confident now that we should be able to get this Cruiser, once we have that intercooler fitted, through the top end of Queensland, the Cape, the top end of Northern Territory, and the Kimberley without any issues. Here's hoping. But it just goes to show how things don't always go to plan. If you were to tell me 12 months ago that I was going to spend $18,000 on this vehicle on top of insurance and registration, there is no way I would have believed you. Now, I am sure that people are going to take this opportunity to point out the Toyota tax and how they're not all reliable like everyone says they are. And to be honest, I would agree with you in some circumstance. This vehicle here does not have a good track record, but I'll point out a couple of things. First of all, some of those issues were caused by aftermarket accessories that I've added personally. And secondly, this Cruiser does get put through some fairly extreme environments. Is expected that things are going to depreciate or at least wear out a lot quicker. This being said, no vehicle is perfect. Every model and manufacturer has known issues, and on top of those known issues, there are also issues that just come as a surprise and a one-off as well. One thing that we've learned after 5 months on the road is that those service intervals come around very quickly. And although things seem like they're always going wrong, we're putting our combination under a lot more stress than we normally would in our regular day-to-day routines back at home, and running up those kilometers much, much quicker. Now, I hope this video has provided some insights about what has and can go wrong on the road, and I certainly hope that you don't experience the quantity and severity of the issues that we've faced so far. But one thing I want to make very clear is please don't be discouraged from getting out there and exploring this country for yourself. Money is money. It comes, it goes. The more you earn, the more you spend. But spending quality times and experiences with the people that you love is something that money just cannot buy, and you will never live to regret. We will return to WA at some point and get back into a more day-to-day type of routine, and we're going to be $18,000 poorer at doing so. But I can always guarantee you that we are not going to look at each other and say, hey, I wish we just stayed here and worked more and didn't travel around Australia with our kids at that age. Problems, situations, and challenges like this builds us up. It pushes us outside of our comfort zone, and it creates a pattern of behavior not only in ourselves, but demonstrates to our kids what can and is possible. But enough with the philosophical speeches. I hope this information has helped, not only to explain what's gone wrong with the Cruiser, but also to show you what has gone wrong overall and what needs to be budgeted for if you're planning to travel around Australia. But we'll be sure to see you next time, in the next episode of Exploring Oz.